there, welcome to our Chicago studios. This is Big Ten Today. Mike Hall alongside Big Daddy Meach. Over the next hour, there's plenty of men's basketball to get to in the Big Ten. This is a busy time of year. Looked at the calendar this morning. 5 weeks from tomorrow starts the men's Big Ten tournament.
And we're starting to see a little separation at the top, potentially now Purdue in the number one seed in the Big Ten race. A lot of teams in the middle. So these next couple of weeks, Mike, I think are going to be critical. See who kind of emerges, who kind of separates themselves, and who falls back.
By the way, before we get into our first schedule thing, how cool has it been the last week or so? On Sunday, we had the top 4 teams in the Big Ten all play each other. This entire week, it's been like every day someone's going to overtime. These games have been really tight, and that kind of speaks to that parity of the middle that we've been talking about all year long.
Well, I think there's such great balance in this league, and then even if you're maybe a favorite, you go on the road, and you know it's going to be a dogfight. So every night out, you don't know who's going to win. You can't pencil anyone in. And the quality of play, I've been really impressed with. The shot making across the board amongst multiple teams, it's been really fun to watch.
There's something, statistic is like the most teams in a single year for the Big Ten that have scored 75 points or more is 6.
It's a different looking league this year.
Right now it's 11 that are scoring 75 points a game or more. That brings us to our big story, and that is the focus on this evening's matchups. There are 3 games to get to. The first one you can see right here on the Big Ten Network. It was Rutgers taking on Maryland in Maryland. Then over on Peacock, a doubleheader with Ohio State hosting Indiana and Minnesota hosting Michigan State. Let's break down these games right now. Why don't we start with that last one? I think big picture, my thoughts when looking at Michigan State and Minnesota is the expectations were very high for Michigan State. They were Final Four high. And then they opened the season 4-5. But ever since then, it's felt like a different team, and it feels like it's not dramatic, but it kind of feels like a slow snowball gaining speed. They've won 10 of their last 13 games.
Yeah, won 5 of their last 6. You just feel like they're priming themselves for a deep March run. That only loss being at Wisconsin, who's one of the best in the country. Now, these 2 teams also just played. Michigan State won by 10 recently. I like how the Spartans are playing. This is a balanced team. So one night it might be Jaden Akins going for 23. Now, Trey Holloman's been quiet lately, but he's had some big nights as well, shooting the ball. They share the ball as well as anyone. You have a point guard in Tyson Walker, or 2 guard, however you want to play him, however Tom Izzo wants to play him, as good as just about any guard in the country. They're a little weak inside. They're not as dominant on the boards as typically Michigan State teams are, but when you have that experience, when you have that guard play, when you have an All-American player like Tyson Walker, Malik Hall's playing better, you have Tom Izzo roaming the sidelines. He knows how to do this as well as anybody. So I like how they're trending. They're going to be a tough out here in February and March.
And it wouldn't be the first time that a Tom Izzo team had a disappointing record in the first 6 weeks of the season, but went on to have a great season. There's still plenty of time left. Someone close to the Michigan State program said something to me that I thought was interesting. They're like, if you're going to oversimplify what's been wrong with Michigan State, you would do it around Malik Hall, that he hasn't been as good as he can be. And if he's only an okay player, and if he's only bringing okay energy, they're going to suffer. And that hasn't been the case the last couple of weeks. He's been scoring more, his energy's been better, his fight's been better.
We had 0 points against Northwestern, but since then he's been really consistent. I think because we see the ability at moments, we think, oh, he can do more, but he's been really good. I thought against Maryland on Sunday, 19 points, got to the free throw line, was very efficient against one of the best defensive teams, not just in the conference, but the country. He's a guy that they're going to play through more. You see oftentimes they'll start halves, they'll start games going to Malik Hall in the post. Very versatile piece. And I also go back to Tom Izzo. He's done this before. Here's the thing. They took their lumps early. They typically challenge themselves early, but he recruits tough players. He knows how to coach tough players. So over the course of the season, look, everybody goes through ups and downs. They seem to kind of figure out some things earlier in December, you know, maybe as opposed to January that other teams do. So now they're hitting their strides when other teams are kind of getting hit in the mouth and learning how to pick themselves back up off the mat. Right. Michigan State, they seem to do that earlier in the season, and therefore they're better as you get into the grunt of the Big Ten slate.
And this game they have today is by no means going to be a walk in the park. No. You mentioned they beat them earlier, but Minnesota is a different team this year. I called a game of theirs a week ago, and Ben Johnson said, I want our guys to be thinking that they're an NCAA tournament team, But that's hard for them because only one of them has ever played in an NCAA tournament. But they have a shot. There's a long way to go, but they have a legitimate reason to think they can make the NCAA tournament.
I'm glad you went there. I think belief is the most important thing for this ball club. They have some young guys, they have some experienced guys, but they haven't really maybe tasted that success. You have a point guard that's jumped up a level to the Big Ten. So believing they can do it is so crucial for them. And here, against Michigan State, the Gophers' strength is on the interior. Dawson Garcia went for 22 the first game. Pharrell Payne is as physical of a guy that we have in our league. And if Minnesota, Hawkins running the point, when Christie's been playing better, he's been knocking down some shots. As a big clutch one against Northwestern. When they're knocking down shots, but they play through the paint where Michigan State isn't quite as strong. This is going to be a great game tonight.
I'm glad you brought up the Northwestern game because they beat them in the last game in overtime. They've now won back-to-back games. But in that game, so many different things happened. You mentioned the freshman Cam Christie hitting a big shot in the final minute. Dawson Garcia scores 8 unanswered points in overtime for them. Pharrell Payne comes back from injury, had a huge block late in the game. I mean, they're getting it from all sorts of different guys.
And this is a deep team. I think a recent memory the past couple of years, they were so light, they had no depth. Last season just did not have Big Ten talent. And now what they roll onto the court, they can compete with anybody. And I think Michigan State's going to have their work cut out for them in the paint, on the glass. That's where Minnesota, if they can dominate that can help them control the pace. When you play the Spartans, controlling the tempo of the game is so crucial. Elijah Hawkins did not play in their first matchup. He was hurt. He's been playing well, had 13 points, 10 assists in that win over Northwestern. If he's running the show and he's able to get into the paint and now kick it out to shooters when they're knocking down shots, this team is really tough. Now, it's not easy to control the pace against Michigan State. They've been playing with more flow, more pace as of late. I think they're going to pick up some pressure on Hawkins if they try to wear him down defensively with their pressure, but also attacking him on the offensive end. They just have a slew of guards that are high level. That's a tough task for anybody.
It's a team that won only 9 games last year in total. They've got 14 already now with 10 regular season games to go before the Big Ten tournament. Let's get to the next game. Rutgers taking on Maryland. Speaking of schedules, Rutgers' record is not great. Their schedule has been brutal. Here's a look at what they've had recently. Their last 6 losses have included 4 on the road, plus a game against number 2 Purdue.
They're coming off a win, though,
on
the road. Outscored Michigan 39-20 in that second half. I thought they were really good, especially that second half. And Rutgers, look, both these teams, it's going to be a dogfight. Both these teams, 2 of the very best defensive teams in the country. But I'd say for Rutgers, they bring it on that end of the floor when they can rebound the ball well. Cliff Amore, 15 and 11 rebounds in that game. But when they're balanced scoring the ball, I think that's so crucial because they don't have any one guy that is going to get you 15 or 20 a night. So they need 3 or 4 guys to get you 12, 13, 14 points. That's what they did against Michigan. Derek Simpson's a guard that has the ability. He's been a bit inconsistent, still a young player, but because of his athleticism, he's shown flashes that he can be a really good player. 19 and 6 assists, I believe, in that game against Michigan. You got Jeremiah Williams now into the lineup.
Just joined.
Now he's been able to practice with them, but had not been able to play. Played 29 minutes in his first game. So an experienced guy, another good athlete from a guard position. This game tonight, though, 2 really good defensive teams. We'll see who can kind of break free for some points.
And this isn't timely, but I just find it interesting when thinking about Rutgers as a program. You look at the top recruits in the country next year. The number 1 player in the country is going to Duke. The number 2 is going to Rutgers. The number 3 is going to Rutgers. There is help on the way.
And they got another recruit. I know his dad, Lathan Somerville, from down the road in Peoria. He's a good player, too. So they're going to be really fun to watch next year. So also some of these young guys getting the reps this year. Gavin Griffiths has shown promise. So this next month, regardless of what happens, they're likely not going to play in a postseason tournament. What they're building now, the confidence, I think just the reps that these guards are getting is going to bode really well for them next season.
And you mentioned Griffiths. Him and those 2 guys I mentioned are the 3 highest-ranked recruits to go to Rutgers in the modern internet
It's going to be fun.
era.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
They're going to be fun next year. Maryland, the team they're playing, has a guy who's already become fun. That's Jameer Young. Every time he steps on the floor, you're thinking there's a chance he's going to score 30, which is what he did in their last game.
He's doing it, Mike. Yeah, he's been special as of late. 31 against Michigan State. Now he needs some help. Did only 3 players actually make a field goal in that game?
Isn't that wild?
Julian Reese has got to be on the court. 14 minutes, 2 points in that game. They need him to produce at a high level. I thought against Illinois, he took 16 shots, scored 20 points. That's the most field goal shots he's taken all season. They got to feed him. He's got to be a prominent force for them. But Jameer Young, I mean, he's been as good as any guard in this country. Another 30-piece nugget that night. If he can have some help, if he can have some other guys knock down some shots, if Scott and Reese on the interior can be factors, this team is really tough. I saw them take down the Illini in Champaign a few weeks ago because they're so good defensively. When you look across the board, all 5 of those guys, they're big, they're quick, they're athletic, they're aggressive on defense, even the freshmen that play. So that's their calling card. Now if they can just generate a little bit more offense outside of Young, they're tough.
And they feel like they're close. I mean, and the results show you, right? In their last 7 games, they're 4-3. But of those 3 losses, 2 of them came by 1 possession. So they're this close to being 6-1 in their last 7 games.
Very close, and they have a great closer, too. You know, on the show, I said some of the best closers. I excluded Jameer Young that night at Iowa. He made all the plays down the stretch, including a game winner. So he's been fabulous down the stretch, really for 40 minutes, night in, night out. And you like it when you can be close and you have a guy like Young to play through. You know, if I'm the head coach, I like my chances.
So basically all 4 of the teams we've talked about so far are teams that have glimmers of hope, either in the immediate future or in the near future.
For sure.
This last game, it gets tougher to find hope, right? You got an Ohio State team that's lost 7 of their last 8 against an Indiana squad that I want to start off with. Indiana lost their last game at home to a Penn State team that didn't have their leading scorer by 14 points.
Yeah, that's unacceptable, I think, for Hoosier fans.
It's a good word for it.
And look, the guard play has really been tough for the Hoosiers. Obviously, Xavier Johnson has had his injuries. I don't know his status right now, if he's going to be able to play. Malik Renew has had injuries. When you have a short roster, it's really tough to withstand having guys not play. Now, I don't know why you don't have more capable ball handlers and playmakers on the perimeter. That's really been an issue for them. Also, shot making, it's a head scratcher. And the tough thing is, too, on the inside, they're really good. Khalil Ware, coming back from injuries, went for 23-10 and 25-11 the last 2 games. If Malik Renew can now come back from injury, and those guys learn how to kind of play off each other, because I thought Renew took a big step when Ware went to the bench for a few games, and now together that could be the best inside tandem in the conference. I think Mackenzie Mbako is making shots. I mean, he has a presence about him at 6'8", really impressive young player, but they need a little bit more from their backcourt for sure.
Yeah, Ware has been great, like you said. Back-to-back double-doubles, each game scoring more than 20 points per contest. He's been fun, but yeah, the injury to Xavier Johnson has been hard. That loss still, there's no qualifiers that make an Indiana fan feel it's okay to lose by 14 at home to a Penn State team without their leading scorer. As for Ohio State, I mean, it's just, this thing's starting to get away from them at this point.
It's unfortunate. We saw this happen last year. We'll see right now. There's time to turn it around. Okay, we're not in March yet, and then they turned around too late in the Big Ten tournament, kind of when you play with nothing to lose. And I think they need to have that same philosophy. Hey, forget the expectations, forget the chatter, forget the outside noise. You got nothing to lose. Go play with some pride. Go let it all hang out. They have not shot the ball well at all. In those 7 losses, 30% from 3. Now they're giving up high 40% from 3. So just the 3-point line has really been cruel to them over the past couple months. This team, though, they feel like they're still kind of searching for their identity. What type of team are they? The guards were so good before conference play came in. And now you have maybe better defenses, better scouting against these guys. So Roddy Gale in particular has not been quite as efficient. And outside of Jamison Battle, nobody's knocking down shots for them. For me, though, when I look at this group, though, it's got to start on the defensive end. Yeah. Okay, that's what maybe you can count on night in, night out. They haven't been great on that end of the floor. If they can shore that up, if they can get some stops, then get out into transition. Now Gale and Mahaffey and Akpara, maybe you're getting some easy buckets. Now that rim becomes larger. You get some more confidence on the offensive end, but they got to be better on defense.
4 straight losses for Ohio State. They'll try to snap that against the Hoosiers coming up later on this evening. We're just getting started here on Big Ten today. We're going to look ahead to the 2 NU schools who've had a really interesting stretch the last few weeks. We'll talk about what they can do with the rest of their season. And we'll look at the ceiling for Big Ten teams. How high can Michigan State get? How good can Purdue be? All that's coming up later on Big Ten Today. Let's look at the two NU schools. In the last 10 games that they have played, each school has gone 5-5. And you can clearly see offensively it's different when they're winning versus losing, 10 points a game more. And of course, the three-point percentage, much better when you're winning than losing. Let me start off on Nebraska. This team is so interesting to me. They've already tied last year's win total. They have 8 still games to play before the Big Ten tournament. So this is a season that's been on the rise, but there have been some up and downs recently. What do you make of them?
Well, one, I really enjoy watching them play. I think they're elite. The skill across the board and their spacing on offense makes them a tough team to match up against, to scout against. There's not another center like Rink Mask, and I look at him as the hub of their team. He's what kind of unlocks this team. It's interesting that you showed Northwestern, Nebraska, some similarities, and there are similarities in how they play with the skill, the spacing, the shooting, but where Northwestern does a lot of ball screens, Nebraska has a lot of dribble handoffs, DHOs, featuring Rink Mask. He's picking and popping. They have great cutting action off him, and their depth is really good. When you think about Keisei Tominaga had a couple games where he was not that great. And look at CJ Wilcher, the firepower that they potentially have off the bench. He was making tough shots. Then they go to Champaign, and Tominaga was he had himself a day. He was making tough shot after tough shot. Such a fun player to watch. So their depth is really impressive to me. Also, these two teams defensively, they'll trap the post. They're really heavy on the help side. So they have some similar schemes on both sides of the floor. But Nebraska, just a really fun team to watch. And I think if I'm Fred Hoiberg, what I would feel very good moving forward is the fight that they showed last week. Right. Being down to Wisconsin, I thought they could have folded. And I thought, hey, pack it up. You're playing against a top 10 team. Time to go home. We'll get the next one out. They didn't do that. They got that win. It was really a big win for them. And then to go on the road in Champaign, they're down by 10 with under 4 minutes left. It's a tie. They take the lead with, 5 or 6 seconds left. Really played great down the stretch. And I think the fight is something that I maybe didn't see for them. They were a team for me, Mike, that when things were rolling, it's like, watch out. This team is good. They're knocking down shots. But to handle that adversity, to fight through it, I'm really high. I'm optimistic about what they could do here in February and March.
Yeah, back-to-back games against teams in the top 4 in the Big Ten where you go to overtime. You win one, you lose another. I agree with what you said, too. It's a good and a bad is that they've got so many good players that when Rink Mask is inconsistent and has an off night, odds are Wilcher's going to be hot. Odds are Tominaga is going to be hot. When Tominaga has an off night, which he did a couple games ago, Mask can go for 30. Wilcher can still have 20 coming off the bench. So that's great that they've got that depth. What about the Wildcats? They've lost 2 straight games. Again, I don't think either of them are very concerning. One is on the road against number 2 Purdue. One was on the road in overtime against Minnesota. But this felt like a team a week ago where you're going, boy, this could be the best team Chris Collins has ever had. And I don't know that went away, but you feel a little differently after back-to-back losses.
Well, they don't have the depth, okay? Again, a team that I really enjoy playing, but if I'm concerned about one thing, it'd be the depth. Okay, when I look at those games, 3 overtime games recently, and when you look at those 4 guards that are so good, Bowie, Barnheiser at the 4 is more of a guard, Langborg and Barry, they're all playing almost 40 minutes in those games. I believe Bowie played all but 7 minutes in those 3 overtime games. And I thought the final one of them at Minnesota, he didn't really get much going in overtime.
Barely shot it at all.
And you felt like his legs, his fatigue, maybe you're getting to him a little bit, which is understandably so. Now, you're not going to face that stretch most weeks. 3 just really tough games like that. But that is a concern for me. But still, what I love about Northwestern is their skill and their toughness. Yeah. And when you can roll out 4 guards like that and space the floor, they do a good job of hunting mismatches. Barnheiser seems to always have a mismatch. Bowie's, he's played as well as any guard in the country. So I like this team. Their depth is a concern, but heck, they're shooting almost 40% from the 3. And they're tough as nails. They're experienced. They've been to the NCAA tournament. They're going to be back there and be really tough out, in my opinion.
I know the headlines from a couple games ago was the Chris Collins ejection at the end of the game, and he was upset because of the vast foul disparity. But also on the season, they're fouling too much. I mean, they're committing way too many fouls this season. If they can somehow trim that down, that'll help make close games start to turn their way. And when you have close games, that's why you have a 500
I'd like to see you guard Zach Edey.
Can't do it. Not going to happen. It's understandable.
I'd be hacking too, yeah.
So those are guys that have been 500 recently. Let's look at some of the teams in Big Ten play that are just around 500 and where they have to go. And in conference play, you see that's basically the entire middle, right? From a 6-5 Northwestern all the way down to a 5-6 Iowa. There's that big jumble of teams in the middle. And I want to talk about some of the teams that we think could be great this year. I think it's safe to say we already know Purdue is great, right? They're the number 2 team in the country. They've got, 5 wins against teams ranked in the top 10 at the time that they played them already this season. How high is the Boilermakers ceiling this year?
So when I look about ceiling, I'm thinking realistically, when I see them at their best, these teams, where do I think they could go? And for Purdue, there's no doubt it's a national championship. Not just a championship game, but to win the national championship. Let me be clear, they have everything you want. A great coach, experienced coach, the National Player of the Year, is going to do it for the second time this year. Fantastic guard play, more experience from the guards. They've also taken their lumps, right? They went through some really bad losses last year. I think that'll bode well for them this year. All right, they're going to get back and they're going to have a chip on their shoulder. Lance Jones, we've talked about it a lot. What he added was just the piece they needed. They have depth. They have a bench. They have guys that are capable on the bench that don't always get a whole lot of minutes, but if their number is called, thinking of Cam Heide, Mason Gillis has been phenomenal this year, shooting over 50% from the 3. So guards, depth, the National Player of the Year, their ceiling is national champions.
Right. Not much to not like about what we've seen so far from the Boilermakers. Our next team is Illinois, and I don't know if you have them at the national championship level, but I bet they're not far behind when they're at their best.
I look at them as a Final Four team.
Yeah.
They're just such a different type of team, opponent for other teams to match up against. Across the board, these guys are 6'6" and above for the most part, the guys that play major minutes. Defensively, they can all guard their yard. They're versatile on that end of the floor. On offense, they hunt mismatches a lot. Marcus Damask is as good of a one-on-one player as we have in our conference. Terrence Shannon, you feel like that rhythm is coming back a little bit. I think they still have some more room to go, so that'll be the most important part for them over this next month. As we get into March, Terrence Shannon getting back into the fold. Quincy Guerrier was playing so well, has kind of taken a step back, but if they can have Guerrier, Luke Goody, Justin Harmon knocking down shots off the bench, there's no doubt. Just because of individually, the talent there, the versatility, it's a really difficult matchup. It's a different type of team to prepare for. They could be Final Four good.
And I think a guy that does not get talked about because statistically he's not what Gary or Shannon or Goody or those guys are is Ty Rodgers. Every time I watch Illinois play well, he's in the middle of whatever's happening.
Well, I didn't mention Coleman Hawkins, but I love, there's so many players. But Ty Rodgers, yes, Mike. And I think about, teams are putting their center on him, okay? Purdue, it went pretty well, but I feel like he's figured out how to go up against a center. He's got he can get a full head of steam, whether it's crashing the glass or off the bounce, using his quickness, using his aggressiveness. He's played at such a great level.
Yeah.
How he rebounds, how he defends. He's been a fun player to watch.
Such an all-around guy. You need a big rebound, he'll get it. You need the right pass at the right time, he'll give it. You need him to score, he can find a way to do it. One more team before we take a break on this idea of the ceiling of these squads. Where are the Badgers at this point? Their last game they played was a loss against Purdue, still ranked very highly nationally. How high can things get for them?
And they lost at Nebraska. They had 2 losses in a row, but I still look at their ceiling as the Final Four.
Yeah.
They have experience. They have depth. They have, a star, potential star, I think, in A.J. Storr, who can take over any game with his ability, with his athleticism. You have Chucky Hepburn, a very experienced point guard. I think what's been really crucial for them lately is Max Klesmit. He's emerged as a guy who's gone for 24, 26 in some recent games that gives them another guy that can go for 20 points. I think that's really important. Tyler Wall's playing well. He's healthy. Stephen Crow, we've seen his evolution. He can stretch the floor. So I think because of their depth, their experience, and their talent. I mean, I haven't even mentioned guys off the bench like Blackwell and Asijan. Winter can knock down shots even. So their ceiling is the Final Four. Will they get there? We'll see. It'll be really interesting to see how they respond after 2 losses.
The last Final Four team they had was that Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker squad. And Klesmit gives me a little bit of a vibe of a Bronson Koenig.
Oh, yeah.
Where like he could score 15 points in 6 minutes for you at any given time, even though he's not your first or the second guy that you have to stop. on this team. So in this last segment, we talked about all of the top 4 teams in the league. We started off with Nebraska, then we went to Wisconsin, Illinois, and Purdue. What about that next level down? Teams that have a chance to have a higher ceiling than maybe you think right now based on their record? That's right after this. Signing Day Part 2 is here tomorrow. 4 Eastern, 3 Central Time. Alan True will join me and Jake Butt and Howard Griffith. We'll have special guests, some of the brand new head coaches in the league like Sharon Moore and Jed Fish. We'll be talking about their programs and the future. And of course, it's a different signing day than you're used to historically. A lot of the focus will be on the transfers as the world of college football has changed so much the last couple years since the transfer portal became such a big deal. It is 90 minutes. We will cover all 18 teams that will be playing Big Ten football next year. We'll see you for that on Wednesday. Back here on Big Ten today, Mike Hall and Big Daddy Meach talking some Big Ten hoops. And in the last segment, we were talking about teams that had high ceilings. And we talked about those guys at the top of the league. Let's go to that next tier. I want to ask you about Michigan State. We talked about them a little bit earlier. They've won 5 of their last 6 games. Their schedule feels like it could be going well for them. How good could things actually be for them?
Okay, when I see them, when they're playing at their best, I think their ceiling is an Elite 8 caliber team.
Wow.
I think they're that good. They have guys that have played in those types of games before. When you look at the backcourt, I'm always going to start in the backcourt. We talk about guards win in March. You have Tyson Walker, love his game, can do it with the ball, can do it without the ball. A.J. Hoggard started the season slow, and it seemed like that was a narrative, but he's been playing pretty darn well. Kind of a bully of a point guard. So you start with those 2 guys, Akins and Holloman. You have wing players. They're getting out in transition more. Malik Hall has been consistent. He's been better. Yes, the interior isn't what traditional Spartans teams have. They're not as good on the boards as they normally are. But I like how this team is trending. Winning 5 of their last 6. I feel like that is only going to improve. Tom Izzo on the sidelines.
Right.
He kind of knows their thing of how to navigate a season, how to prime his team to be playing their best basketball as you get into March. So I would not want to see this team in the NCAA tournament. I don't care who you are.
And they are a team that has experience. I remember when we had Izzo on our football pregame show, Big Ten Tailgate, I asked him, the first question I said was about the freshmen. He goes, I want to talk about my older guys. Like, he knows that's what's going to win for him at the end of the season, and at least they do have that going for them. What about Minnesota? We mentioned them a little bit earlier in the year. Already 5 more wins than they had at this point last year. Or pardon me, 5 more wins than they had all of last year. They already are there. 6 more wins, you're at the 20-win mark, which is not what a selection committee needs, but it kind of is a barometer of where teams are if they're going to be an at-large selection. What's their ceiling?
Well, Mike, you talked about this earlier when we mentioned Minnesota, what Ben Johnson said, and I failed to mention about Michigan State. I think Michigan State has belief in themselves, which is crucial. Now, does Minnesota, on the other end, do they have that belief? I don't know if it's there yet, but I think that's the most important thing. Do they believe they can win these games? Do they believe they're an NCAA tournament team? Because these players haven't really experienced that yet. It's hard to get over the hump when you just haven't been there yet as an individual, as a team. I think they can get there. They've taken tremendous strides. They have the talent. They have the interior strength. They have a player in Dawson Garcia that you can play through. That's a legitimate, all-conference type of player. That's a matchup problem any given night. So I love that. Elijah Hawkins is so important for them. He's their one true point guard. And when he's playing well, when he's getting into the paint, making good decisions, controlling the tempo of the game, we're going to see that tonight against Michigan State. Can he control the tempo? It's going to be hard to do. But if he's doing that, Cam Christie has been playing better. He's a freshman, but at this point in the season, does he feel a little bit more like a sophomore? This team, there's no doubt. Did I even say their ceiling yet? There's no doubt. My bad. They're an NCAA tournament team. My ceiling for them is they can play in the big dance, and I think they could win a game in the big dance too. That's their ceiling.
It is rare that you ever have someone on your team who's number 1 in the country in something. And they have that with Elijah Hawkins leading the nation in assists per game. All right, let's turn our attention to those teams who aren't quite ready to talk about their ceiling because they've still got work to do. These are the squads in the Big Ten that are just under 500 in conference play right now. With a 5-6 record, you've got Indiana, Iowa, Maryland, and Penn State. So the question is, how can these teams get over that 500 mark so that they can start thinking as we get to the end of February about the potential of NCAA tournament dreams? Let's start off with the Hoosiers. What do you need to see from them?
Well, we talked about them earlier, and that loss at home against Penn State, I just said it was unacceptable, I think, if I'm a Hoosier fan. But their guards have got to be serviceable, okay? They gotta be able to initiate the offense, get them into their flow, limit turnovers, and then they got to be able to knock down some shots. That's been such a struggle for the Hoosier Ball Club, but with the strength inside, the guards don't have to create a whole lot. Can they run the offense, get it to Malik Renew, get it to Khalil Ware, and then let, I think, Mackenzie Mbako continue to develop his game. He's only improved throughout the course of the season. I think he could take another jump the next month of the season, especially as maybe more responsibility, more load falls onto him. So offensively, that's what they got to do. And I do think there's a little bit of hope of, I mentioned it earlier, the two bigs. When Ware went down with an injury, Renew stepped up. Right. Okay, now Renew's gone out, and Ware has stepped up. Now you bring them both together. That's a deadly duo, those two guys. And then defensively, they got to be great defensively. They've been inconsistent. You have Iowa at home. You limit them to 64 points, and then you give up over 80 points to Penn State. That's what's kind of unacceptable. If they can be great on the defensive end, guards can be serviceable, knock down some shots. They have some things to work with.
It's interesting you brought up defense, because as we turn to our next team, they are not known for their defense. It is the Iowa Hawkeyes.
But I love watching them play.
They're one of the most entertaining teams, right? They're scoring in the 80s almost all the time, sometimes in the 90s. They are a fun team. They have players that you think can step up. Can you consistently get all of them playing at their best is the question.
I'd say this, Mike. They're capable of making a run.
I agree.
I think because of their firepower on the offensive end. Ben Krikke and Owen Freeman were playing so well in the interior. Those two post players playing together. Owen Freeman, maybe freshman of the year. Ben Krikke, great transfer from Valparaiso. They've taken a step back recently. But their guards, the three-guard lineup, Tony Perkins, Peyton Samford, Josh Dix as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he's really emerged as he's gotten into the starting lineup. He's got some game to him, Mike.
Really does.
Great pull-up game. Perkins almost averaging 16, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. He does it all. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I think he's a first-team caliber player in our conference, one of the best guards in the country in my eyes. And so those three guards are playing so well. If the bigs now can kind of regain the form they had earlier in the season, they roll out a starting lineup that can score with anybody. They have a little bit more size than they've had in the past because they play too big, so they're better rebounding. I think they're very capable of run. We'll see if they actually can do it.
You're right. There are so many guys that could go for 15 or more on any given night on that roster. I agree. That's another team. I know we're not talking ceilings anymore, but their ceiling is an NCAA tournament team for sure.
They got to go on a run, but they're capable.
But they have time to find a way to do that. What about Maryland? You talk about all-conference caliber players. Juju Reese is a guy who's in that conversation for all-conference player for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt. Last game, didn't really get going at all in foul trouble. If you're a player that's that good, Julian Reese, you might need to let one go. Okay, let a bucket go just so you can stay on the floor. But Maryland, they're so stingy, so good defensively, one of the best defensive teams in the country. So that's where I start. When you look at some of these other teams that struggle, it's because they're not consistent there. Maryland is very good there. You have their point guard in Jameer Young. That gives you the ability to win games. And I'll go back, watching that game in person, winning in Champaign over the Illini, who was playing so well. Jameer Young was fabulous, went for 30, went to Julian Reese in the post. He was very effective against the Illini. But what'll be crucial for them is, can you just have a few guys knock down some shots? Yeah. In that game, Jordan Geronimo made a 3. Deshaun Harris-Smith made some shots. If they can have a couple other guys knock down some perimeter shots, now this team could definitely get above 500, finish, maybe even compete for that 4th spot in the league and be a tough out in the NCAA tournament.
Work to do. Have to prove it before they do anything else.
Sure.
Speaking of East Coast teams, when we come back, we're going to turn our attention towards Penn State. This is a squad that we just mentioned had a win over an Indiana team on the road in Bloomington. What has Big Daddy Meach seen from them? We'll talk about that next.
Baldwin a 3. Gets Penn State their first lead of the game. Baltimore's finest showing up. What a feed. Ace Baldwin Jr. inside to DeMarco Dunn. Baldwin a 3. From downtown. Baldwin parted the seas and laid it in with the left hand. 22 for the VCU transfer.
This was a business trip for the Nittany Lions, and they took care of business here this afternoon.
Brings us to our big stat of the show, and that is the last 2 games for Penn State on the road at Rutgers and Indiana. Look how much better they've been in the second half in almost every major category. I love the free throws attempted. I mean, they're getting to the hoop and forcing fouls to be called on them. And what's so interesting about everything you see on that graphic, Trent, is that the game before that, before they had these 2 road games, they blew it at home against Minnesota because of a bad second half. So it's like they figured out what went wrong in that game and have completely fixed it in the 2 games since then.
Well, it's a 40-minute game, and that's what's hard to do, is to really play complete 40-minute games. We've seen lately some 45-minute games, right? So it's not easy for anybody, but give them a ton of credit to go into 2 of the tougher places to play on the road. I don't care how good Rutgers is this year or Indiana, to get back-to-back wins without your leading scorer in Kanye Clary being out. I mean, who's just been such a force this year, is really impressive. Ace Baldwin Jr., though, because Penn State is not up at the top of the standings, I don't think he's talked about as one of the better point guards in this league. But, coming from the A-10, was a conference player of the year and the defensive player of the year, is so disruptive on both ends of the floor, or on the defensive end of the floor. And then offensively, he can, I think, control the game with his skill, with his intelligence, as well as anybody we got. I mean, 19 points, 9 assists averaging over those 2 wins on the road, played 40 minutes at Indiana in the Assembly Hall, in complete control. And, of course, Mike Rhodes brings him over from VCU. Great relationship between those 2 guys. So with him running the show, I mean, and then they're knocking down shots. I like the free throws too, Mike, but 12 for 22 from the 3-point line against Indiana, that does help.
I think it's interesting, big picture, on what Mike Rhodes wants to do with this program, that he was able to get Ace Baldwin to come with him, because he runs a different system and a different program than those Nittany Lion players had under Micah Shrewsbury. And it's not something that they're necessarily used to. But when you bring in a guy in Baldwin who's not only been in that system, but is an experienced guy and can kind of instantly be the leader and show everybody, no, this is how it has to work day to day, in practice, at shoot-arounds, on the games. That, I know they're not having a great season, but big picture, if Penn State does turn things around under him, that could be one of the most important transfers in years. For sure, and they're trending in the right direction right now. So we'll see what they can do over this next month. And to speak about Mike Rhodes, Mike Hall, if I'm a guard, and I'm a high school kid, or I'm maybe playing at another school and I'm looking to transfer this year, I mean, look what he's got. 2 point guards there, 2 small guards that are both thriving in his system. Yeah. I think basketball, it is a guards game with Kanye Clary, Ace Baldwin Jr. He's kind of giving them the keys to kind of do their thing. And man, I tell you what, that would be really enticing for another talented guard to step into. Hey, Mike Rhodes, we're going to play up-tempo. We're going to get after it on the defensive end. It's a very distinct style. You know what you're getting into. And he lets them go offensively. So I think he's going to be a great recruiter. And I just have a feeling, year in, year out, Penn State's going to have some really tough guards. And I think he knows it. He knows that is what his system does. That is the type of player he is able to have. Look at what happened to Kanye Clary. I mean, I was looking back the other day at my notes before the season on Penn State, and my notes said the highest returning scorer on this team is Kanye Clary at 3 points a game. And the point was, like, they basically brought nobody back. Now he leads the team in scoring with 18. That's a crazy turnaround from one year to another. And, of course, you got to give Kanye Clary a lot of credit. Obviously he put in some work. He believed in himself. He's got a lot of ability, as we've seen this year. He's so physical, so quick, so shifty as a lefty. I mean, just so tough. Maybe the toughest guy in our league to keep out of the paint. But I'd go back to this system, too. I don't think he would do that just with any coach, with any system. I think how Mike Rhodes is playing, it really is attractive to good guards. And then I also say their team now. I think Wahhab's played better on the inside. Yep. They're knocking down shots. DeMarco Dunn, another guard that's playing well. So shown some real good bright spots. Yeah, for sure. Jameel Brown off the bench in their last game. So Zach Hicks, I think he's a guy that could be a difference maker. If he's knocking down shots with his length, with his athleticism. This team, we've said it before, they gave Wisconsin their first loss in this league.
I think they're going to get some other people, and I don't think they're going to be a fun team to play up in Minneapolis either.
Penn State men's team has been a tough out recently. Same can be said for the Penn State women's team. I mean, they were already pretty good with McKenna Marisa running the ship. Then they added Ashley Owusu recently, haven't lost since she joined up, and guess what?
That's going to be a good one.
They're taking on the number 2 ranked Iowa Hawkeyes and Caitlin Clark, who is 65 points away from breaking the all-time women's college basketball career scoring record. Her latest chance to chip away comes on our air Thursday, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. You are going to want to watch.
All Jennie Hall did was win, leading Rutgers to the 1982 AIAW National Championship. She won 99 games in her Scarlet Knight career, becoming an All-American in her senior year, and was the 1983 Headley Singer Award winner, given to the top graduating Rutgers female student athlete. She won a silver medal in the 1985 World University Games and was a 2-time U.S. Olympic team invitee. Hall became the first American woman to play professionally in Finland and made 3 National All-Star teams in her 7 years overseas. After serving as an assistant coach for 8 years, Hall was named the 1999 MEAC Coach of the Year as the head coach at Coppin State. She serves as the head coach of Norristown girls basketball team, where she previously was a 3-time All-American from 1977 to 1979. Continuing to show why she's a big impact pioneer, class of 2024.
Stay on the theme of women's basketball as we turn our attention to what happened last night. The Boilermakers got the 500th win at Mackey Arena on the women's side. They had a really tough month of January, but this victory ended a 7-game losing streak for them as they try to turn things around just in time for the Big Ten tournament. Meanwhile, Michigan State lost their first game a few weeks back to Minnesota. Haven't lost a game since and got a little bit revenge, taking down the Gophers, who still don't have Mara Braun, out indefinitely with a foot injury. But a nice win for the green and the white. Speaking of the green and the white, Malik Hall, great last name obviously, on fire. He has stepped up his basketball recently, especially in the second half of that game against Maryland. Here's what his head coach Tom Izzo had to say on challenging Hall to get the most out of him.
I guess the biggest thrill was I didn't think Malik Hall played very well the first half, and we challenged him, timeouts, we challenged him at halftime, and he responded, and I think a lot of times he always says, "What do you want from me?" I said, "The second half. That's all. Just give me the second half. Shut my mouth. I'll be cool. I'll be fine."
You can tell how important Tom Izzo thinks Malik Hall is towards this team being able to be as good as they are, which, as you mentioned, their ceiling is very good. It involves a deep run in the NCAA tournament.
And he's such an important piece for them because we've talked about this great slew of guards that they have, but he's the one guy that's a real post presence for the Spartans. They don't have a big guy they go dump it down to, but they have the 6'8", 220-pound Malik Hall, very versatile player, can take you outside, but he's best with his back to the basket. He's best slashing to the basket. The last game, getting to the free throw line 11 times. That's big. Look at that free throw attempts mark for him. I think if that's creeping up towards double digits, he's really aggressive, playing to his strengths. That bodes extremely well for the Spartans and their ball club. I thought it was just interesting that the question that he asked his coach, "What do you want from me, coach?" And it's like, hey, the second half. It feels like he's a guy that Izzo has just continued to ride in some ways, and it's because he believes in him.
He knows how good he can be.
And exactly. And Malik Hall's been a guy who's more been like a third, fourth option throughout his career. Played on some really good teams. Joey Hauser was there, another forward spot last year. I think he's got to realize, hey, he can be a guy that can give you 15, 16, 17 points a night. I think he has that ability. We've seen it in flashes. If he can consistently do that, that would really give them another level.
And it's interesting, just that concept of how coaches motivate their players, because every person is different. And some guys need to be yelled at. Some guys need to have some space. Some guys need to have their hand held a little bit. That's kind of the challenge for every coaching staff, to figure out what each player is on their roster.
I don't know if Tom Izzo's holding many hands, but he.
That's what the assistants are for.
But he I would say his tough love, though. You see him with his arm around guys, at half court, after kind of like berating them. So he's one of the best at motivating. And here's the deal, Mike. You talk about physical abilities, skills, strategy. What trumps that is the hunger, the desire, the motivation, the resiliency, the mental toughness and confidence of a player. And that's where Tom Izzo seems to be able to pull those strings as well as anybody.
He's got a pretty good track record.
He does.
Seems to hold up for sure. Good stuff, Trent. Thank
Thanks,
you,
Mike.
man. Nice show. Thank you for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning for another edition of Big Ten Today.